Action. Well, welcome to the first episode or instalment of Shed TV, what will be a weekly broadcast from Go Commercial, where we'll have industry professionals and consultants like Scott Smith here from Cairns Finance. And next week we'll be having somebody else on. Haven't decided yet, but maybe you might want to get on our Facebook page and let us know who you'd like to see interviewed, what you'd like to learn, because what this is all about is getting people to understand that when you're a tradie, and that's our core business, is looking after tradies, industrial sheds, and getting them to stop being tenants and get in and own your own shed. That's what we're all about. That's what I did back in the 90s when I had Austec Communications, and that's what I do now. All right, so get online, let us know what you want to see, what you want to hear, and we'll just make it happen. All right, so and by the way, we'll be doing live Facebook streaming, or live streaming on Facebook next week. So that gives you an opportunity to interact with us online. We'll be able to see you and your questions right here, and they'll be answered in real time. So may as well make use of the technology, I say. All right, so it's a new financial year, and Scott Smith's got some great ideas on how people can move away from renting and being owners of sheds. So thanks for coming in, Scott.
No worries at all. Thanks for having us, guys. Always a pleasure. New financial year. Hopefully people did a little preparation before the end of last financial year for the tax return that your accountants are going to be working on in the next 6 months or so. But new financial year may be a good opportunity now to think about getting your ducks lined up and getting off that rental roundabout. I think there's a few ways that you can do it. In terms of purchasing a property, I think affordability is fantastic at the moment. We just saw another interest rate cut last night, so we're going to see rates really at an all-time low. They are talking about it falling further. So there's some. In terms of affordability, without any really dramatic price growth in terms of asset values, the affordability is fantastic. For renters at the moment, they're probably paying the equivalent sort of rate of return to the landlord of maybe 7 or 8 or more percent, guys.
Yep.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say if we use 8 as an average.
Yep. And
you're going to finance your property at a lot lower than that. So in terms of affordability, you can make a principal and interest repayment. You can probably pay the rates and the body corporate fees if it is a strata title, and still have money in your pocket, depending on how hard you go at that loan. So it's then a question of where do you get the money from to make a deposit for that.
Well, maybe we should take a step back first and sort of hit on the point of why would you want to own a shed rather than renting. And I think that the people that we've helped out over the years, and there's been a ton of people that have inquired about leasing a property that we've had on our books, both for sale and for lease. And I've said, why don't you buy it? And they've said, I can't afford it. Well, that's when I've sent them to you. You've just enlightened them, and now they're owners of sheds. And look, there are countless number of examples that we could put forward, and we probably will. We'll go and put a camera in their faces and then get them in here, and you can hear their story.
Do some case studies. Yeah.
Yeah. Look, the reality is, as a business owner, and whether you employ people or not, you're not really paying yourself any super. No one's paying you that compulsory 9.5% that is getting tucked away for your retirement. So the best way to do that that I can see and that I've learnt is to buy your own property, and the rent that you would normally pay, which is dead money, goes into building an asset. And that security and also the education of that you'll gain along the way will enable you to not only be in your own shed and work from that and as an owner-occupier, but you'll also then use the cash flow from your business to buy another shed, because you've now got another set of skills. And look, sheds are great. So when it comes to retirement, you might be able to retire early. You might be able to just make a decision, well, I'll put it in the hands of a property manager, or I'll go and mow the lawns myself and have something to do.
Yeah, well, I think there's sort of three main benefits. Really, there's a multitude of benefits in buying your own property, but three principal ones. As a small business owner, you've got absolute tenure over the property, and therefore tenure for the business there. So you're in control. You've got the affordability that we just touched on before, but you're building that your wealth, your asset base, either inside or outside superannuation. There as well. I think the last thing too is, when it comes to retiring, when it comes to exiting your small business, you've got a much better opportunity to sell your small business at a better return if you can offer tenure to the next person.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, a lot of people find they get to the end of their business life and the business isn't worth much often, so the shed is the only asset. In the event that the business is actually worth something, it's great to be able to package it up and be able to offer leasing incentives and actually lease back your own shed.
It's worth something.
It adds to the goodwill, doesn't it?
And that comes down to some of the other things we'll touch on future episodes of Shed TV, and that is the location and the type of shed. Because when you're not using it, or it's too big now, or it's big enough for you now, but later on you can divide it up into smaller sheds and collect the rent. I mean, there's so many things. Location. All of that it applies in industrial property just as much as it does for residential.
Of course.
So, Scott, maybe there's two questions that we get asked pretty commonly. One of them is how to raise a deposit, and I think it's worth going into some detail about that because there are a few options on the table.
Sure.
And the last thing I'd like you to touch on is what sort of impact do really low interest rates historically have on the market? And so my understanding is, this is a historic low, and so given that it's never been this low before, we can only sort of surmise, but my understanding is, although they're trying to stimulate the economy, it's a bit of a case of flogging a dead horse in this instance. But given that money is now so cheap, I would expect that there'd be an uptake in purchases. So a lot more people should be taking that transition because it's just a reasonable thing to do.
It's more affordable to do so.
It's more affordable to do so.
There's something that people need to know, and Warren Buffett, he's the man. We all heard of him, and that is buy when everyone else is selling and sell when everyone else is buying. So although we're hearing it, we're seeing it, it's tough times out there, and tough times come and go, but tough people stay, and it's just the way it is. So that means in tough times, there's opportunities always. You just got to know where to look. The deal of the century comes along every week if you know where to look.
Absolutely.
And that's what we're here to help you with, and especially with Scott. Scott's always our first port of call for anyone who's interested in buying. We say, have you got your finance organised? And I can remember one example where the fellow said, I won't mention any names, but he's bought and sold quite a few sheds through us. And he said, I've been with the XYZ bank for 27 years. And my response to him was that, well, that's 27 reasons why you should go and see a broker. And not only was Scott able to get him a better deal, but his own bank offered him a better deal, because when they know a broker is on the case, they know they're not the only ones with their hat in the ring, that there's other people that are essentially bidding for the business, and they want the business, they're hungry. So your loyalty to a bank is being repaid in nothing more than, sorry, this is the way it is, and they'll give a brand new customer a better deal in most cases.
Well, that often happens. Familiarity can breed contempt. I guess for me, in dealing with a broker, the client should always get at least the same or a better interest rate. The fact is we settle a new loan every 2 days. That's been a statistical average over 13 years, or a bit over 13 years now. So we have a reasonable negotiation piece with the lenders there, and we don't necessarily have to introduce a new bank. Just talking to your existing bank, if they're doing the right things,
because they know that you'll go shopping if they don't sharpen their pencil.
We do have the tools to be able to do that, and we do have the experience and the know-how to be able to do that, and we will do it if we have to. So, I think that's something that you need to bear in mind. That's for sure.
So just going back to the
your
deposit, as we discussed just prior to this episode, there were a few things that we see commonly, but do you just want to go through what's the standard ways of raising a deposit if you don't just have a bag of cash sitting at home?
Yeah, obviously the bag of cash, Dorian, is the best
preferred
one.
option.
Your money is always cheaper than the banks, and,
Yeah.
and if you do have some savings there, that's fantastic. Your savings, could potentially be in superannuation, for example. A lot of people have put money aside in super over the years. If you've got a feeling that you really don't know where it's invested in those managed funds or those deposits, when you see your retail superannuation sort of pie chart at the end of the financial year, and it says you've got cash and you've got interest, fixed interest, and you've got Australian and international equities. Some people just
and lots
don't,
of fees.
and some cost, exactly right. But some people really just don't understand where their money is, and they want to know. It's in the pie chart there somewhere, but where is it really? So if you do want to help yourself become, in absolute control of your fund, if you want to give your business, tenure in its location currently, well then sometimes superannuation purchases can make a bit of sense. With those, we're obviously able to help. We do need some help though from accountants, from planners, and that sort of thing as well. If the client isn't necessarily across all of that stuff.
What sort of limitations are there when you purchase through your super?
Well, there's a few rules, and there's a couple of things that are distinctly different from maybe borrowing in more traditional methods. Putting your cash deposit in, getting a standalone loan in a family trust or in an individual or company name. One of those rules is that the loan itself can only ever go down. You can't redraw. Mm-hmm. We can't borrow or we can't increase the loan for any other reason. We can't use other assets of your fund as the supporting security. So in the past, typically mum and dad, small business person might have paid, their house off or substantially, improve the equity in their property and use that equity as the deposit to buy their commercial property, their shed.
Well, I think that's a really valid point because it's a bit of a myth or a misconception out there that the banks want 40%, and that seems to be the big hurdle for a lot of people making that step from being a tenant into an owner because they think, well, I just don't have that money. Every week the money comes in, the money goes out. I'm not able to save. Well, I mean it's common with a lot of businesses out there. So that's why paying yourself the rent makes so much sense. And there's been a number of times where, people are around 35 years old, happily married, that sort of thing. And mum and dad have got maybe 100 grand or more in super, but they're just at that age, they're not thinking about it. They just, it goes in, it's maybe the guy's did an apprenticeship, and he worked for someone else for lots and lots of years.
Often the case, isn't it?
Yep. And so he's got now 100 grand, 120 grand sitting there, but now he's gone into business for himself. Wife's still working for a wage. She's, getting super coming in, but it's not really doing anything for them. And so by combining those two people into a self-managed super fund, and you can have up to 4 from what I understand. So
Correct,
it could be your workers, your brothers and sisters, your mum and dad, or anyone at all. And that enables you to then pull that money together and go and buy that property and then pay rent to the super fund, and everyone gets their share. It's a very fair way of doing it. And then you're in control of your own money. And I think that's where, when you do that the first time, you get an education on what to look for, how to do the maths. And by the way, come in any time and we'll go through it with you. The maths on what things cost, what the rent should be, it's pretty simple. It really is. 4 walls and a roller door in most cases, and maybe a little office with an air conditioner for most industrial sheds. So it's not rocket science at all. But you've got to make that step. Come in and see us, then talk to Scott, talk to your accountant, and find out which is the best vehicle for you.
That's exactly right. One size doesn't fit all, Stuart, that's for sure. The things that we've spoken about today very generally, I suppose, need to be discussed, really in detail. They need to have included conversations with your accountant, maybe with a planner or a solicitor, with other people. But, conceptually it makes a lot of sense. I know I've done it myself. I can speak from my own personal experience. I am now the best landlord that I've ever met.
He's bought 2 sheds off us.
Can I just ask, it's been some time since we last spoke with regards to the Royal Commission, and my understanding is the government's leaning on the banks to loosen up a little bit. Has that actually flowed on to real world outcomes? I mean...
Not fully, Jerry. No, it's there are some green shoots on that. I think we've seen interest rates fall a couple of times over the last couple of months now, and quite possibly set to continue. But my own personal view is that the lenders need to tweak the settings to improve the capacity for mum and dad to buy. We're getting most of the loans that we put forward approved. A very high proportion, but it is a long and winding road nowadays. It is harder to get a loan from a bank. So, we really need to use our expertise there to try and get that done and make sure we're talking to the right lender. Particularly when it comes to something a bit specialised like self-managed super fund loans. Your major banks aren't doing them anymore. Most of the name brands that you've heard of aren't doing those loans anymore. It doesn't mean they're not available. It just means that they're not ideally there. So I suppose when it comes to the settings, as I'll call it, the lending curbs, as APRA have called it, they are trying to reduce those curbs. They have made some changes to the rules within what lenders should be looking at in terms of affordability and making that a little bit easier.
So is that related to household expenditure measures? Or?
No, that's one of the points of discussion that's still there. One of the things that in particular they've changed, Jorian, is if you're applying for a home loan, for the sake of the argument at the moment, it's really been mandated that the bank needs to assess the affordability of your loan as if rates are at least 7%.
Wow.
And some lenders are calculating that based on 8% or more.
Wow.
So whilst we might be paying in home loan land something that starts with a 3, I mean, that's what it should be nowadays. The affordability rate, or the assessment rate as they actually call it, could be at least 2 and sometimes 3 times what the actual lending rate will be. And that's a massive difference. That's huge. And that's one of the main things that's impacting on affordability. So that's a very direct thing when it comes to home loan land. When it comes to buying a shed, the flow-on effect is the same. Is that you might be paying 4 or 5 or something percent for your commercial loan, but they're going to assess the affordability of that loan as if rates are much, much higher than that. So it does make it more difficult. I guess with the right experience and we put together the right application there, we make sure we understand all of your income. We understand the fact that you won't be paying rent anymore and that you'll be your own landlord going forward, and the rent will be notional and to you.
Look, old money is really the way to go in property. There's no doubt about it. And how do you get old money? Well, you start now. You
accumulate, don't you?
Exactly. And so. All right, well, I think we'll pretty much wrap it up there with Scott today, and unless you've got anything more to say. But I just want to add that having your own shed and walking into work of a morning and being able to touch those doors and windows and look out and see around and look at all those tools and people working there, it's a good feeling knowing that it's yours. You can touch it. And, I've worked for employers in the past, going back quite some time when I first started in real estate, and when I didn't have my own self-managed super fund. I do now. And I can remember a time when I got a nice little letter from the superannuation people, Sun Super, and they just said, sorry, it's been a really crap year and you've gone backwards and we've lost all your money. And so everything that I'd sort of tipped in for the last couple of years that I've been working for another agency was gone. It's as simple as that. So since then, since that event, I went and got my own self-managed super fund, and I have a couple of properties in that, and that's the way it's going to be. And the good thing, under the current tax regime, when I retire, and I think I'm at preservation age within a couple of years, if I decided to retire, it's tax-free money. There is zero tax. How good's that? Now, that could change. Government is it's a big wad of cash out there that they may change the rules at any time. But right now, if you own a couple of properties and you retire, the income from those properties is completely tax-free.
Well, even if it is subject to the top tax rate in an SMSF at the moment, it's 15%.
Yeah.
A hell of a lot lower than company tax. It could be a third of what you pay in individual taxation.
Personal income.
It's very favourable.
Yep. And anything you'd like to say to people that are tenants out there right now that are sort of thinking about becoming owners?
Well, I'd say don't assume.
Yep.
Don't assume you can't afford a shed. At the end of the day, don't assume that you can afford the one that you've got. I think what we need to do is we need to check and measure. We need to have a conversation and understand your personal situation and where you are in your business and what you're looking to try and achieve. And then we'll overlay the right solution. And whether that includes something like SMSF, whether it...
through your business.
Whether it is that you just need to be a tenant for longer. What you should do is have a clear roadmap towards delivering the outcome that you're looking to try and achieve. And you should be doing that in your own business anyway. And certainly to give yourself the tenure in the business and the sustainability and the improved succession plan out of your business as you transition through to retirement is all improved if you're in control. And if you own the shed, you're in much more control.
Yeah, look, there's a number of our clients out there in Cairns that started off with a good business. They bought their own shed, and from that knowledge, they've gone on to buy other sheds. And of course, you've got tenants in there because there'll always be tenants. Our job's to convert tenants into owners, but there'll always be tenants out there that are coming up through the ranks. And basically you then acquire a number of sheds. So we've got these clients that have got 6, 7, 8, 10 properties or more. Some of them have got more. And really what you're doing is just setting yourself up for retirement, and a very comfortable one at that. And then you've always still got the asset that you can sell off if you need a wad of cash to help your kids out or something like that. But it's about building that wealth and starting now.
Get ready.
I think I'd just like to add one last point, is that this has been discussed a lot offline, is that I meet a lot of investors that have invested money in residential, and it's just a comfortable thing. I live in a house, I'm a human, I rent to other people, it's all very easy. They get a bit of money, they buy another house, it seems to make sense. Those people, when they come in and they see the returns that you typically get out of a shed, and you compare the lack of hassle and problems with tenants and that sort of stuff, they're always very pleasantly surprised.
Like the tenant pays the rates and the tenant pays the body corporate fees or the insurance. I mean, they're stunned when they hear that.
But also, by my calculations, typically somewhat more than 2 times net return in terms of money in the pocket.
And with much less hassle. If you think about a house, and I mean, who hasn't had a house? Well, I'm sure there are people that haven't had investment residential property, but I can remember seeing my ex-wife, now ex-wife, crying when we saw the way that these tenants had left a property, and we went in there and we cleaned it up over the weekend, and it was just an earth-shattering experience to see the damage that they had done to what was our home. When we moved up and bought an acreage out near Redlynch and had this Machin's Beach house, which was our first house, but it was horrible. You've got so much that can go wrong in a house: carpets, pools,
You got dogs, you got leaks, you got people.
It's just outrageous. Where when you look at an industrial shed, in most cases, when we're talking, say, strata industrial, 110, 120 square metres, tilt slab concrete, you cannot kill it. And at the end of the day, people can live like pigs at home, but when they come to work, they've got to put on keep the place tidy because it's a reflection of their business. And so they keep it clean. And so that's generally what happens. There are exceptions, but in most cases, your tenant, and if you're leasing through us, we're going to put them through the mill and make sure that they do the right thing. And if they don't, then that's when we come down on them and read them the riot act and hold the lease back up and say, well, this is what you got to do. But that's very rare, and it's our job to filter those people out and screen them out right at the very start. So you get good, reliable tenants that look after your building and pay the rent on time. So look, doesn't matter if you're an owner-occupier or you want to now buy an investment property, and we'll put a tenant in there for you. The thing is, get out of residential, except for your own home, and do it yourself.
Yeah.
Good
Get
advice.
yourself a shed.
Well, speaking from personal experience, I'd certainly suggest it's worth considering too. I'd have to say. Done it twice now.
Beautiful. All right. Thank you for your time, Scott.
No worries at all. Good to see you guys. Thanks,
Thanks,
Stu.
mate.
Cheers.
All right, thanks everybody, and we look forward to next week. I'm not sure if it's going to be Wednesday or not, because we've got an auction on, we've got an open shed barbecue down at 265 to 269 Spence Street next Wednesday, so come along to that. And Scott will be there hopefully, and you can have a chat to him in person about what we've been speaking about today. But we'll be doing our live Facebook live streaming, and we'll have somebody else online. But please, get onto our Facebook page. Let us know if you liked. Thumbs up, thumbs down, whatever, doesn't matter. Let us know what you'd like to see and hear, and we will make it happen. Thanks for tuning in.
Okay.
Cut.
Good stuff, men.
All right.
See how that comes up. So it's Little Spence next week, is it, men?